Hi, I'm Melissa Romano, and I'm going to discuss the environmental impacts of an animal-based diet and how a plant-based diet can help fight climate change and environmental degradation. The first topic to consider when deciding to eat a more plant-based diet is climate change. Man-made climate change is caused by greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, causing temperatures to rise gradually over time. Animal-related farming and agriculture ranks the second highest category of global greenhouse gas emissions, contributing approximately 20 to 40% of all emission based by sectors. Ranking first would be energy production. Shifting from fossil fuels for energy and transportation to renewable sources could cost the US $45 trillion, whereas eating a plant-based diet could cut the cost in half. While not everyone may have the means to purchase an electric car and solar panels, eating a more plant-based diet is not only better for the environment, but think of all the money you'll actually save from not buying animal meat. We raise 70 billion animals annually for human consumption. The livestock sector alone represents almost half of these emissions, mostly due to cattle and lamb releasing methane in their manure and their digestive process known as enteric fermentation. Methane is a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide in our air. You can see from this slide, the cattle and lamb have a carbon footprint comparable or just a bit more than a journey in a mid-sized car, whereas the rest of the food are about half as that. The reason why lamb and cattle are higher is because of their size. As cattle are larger animals, each cow has more edible meat than a lamb. Again, here you can see that eating beef is the very top of the chart. Note, cheese and dairy are also the third and the fourth row, and pig and poultry are the 9th and the 10th row. And all the way at the bottom, you can see nuts actually have a negative land use because they store carbon in their trees. You can see the other carbon emission sources for food products are from various things like land use change, farming emissions, animal feed, processing, transport, retail, packaging, tractors, big rigs, factories, refrigerators, they all use fossil fuels. There's gasoline and oil in the vehicles, electricity derived from burning fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. Common packaging includes styrofoam and plastic, both which are made from fossil fuels. Thus, animal protein creates 10 times as much carbon dioxide than plant proteins. Replacing beef would reduce carbon dioxide. Replacing beef with plants would bring carbon dioxide down from 1,984 pounds to just 73 pounds of carbon dioxide. So just by cutting out beef alone, you can make a huge impact to climate change. Next, contributing to climate change is the loss of carbon stored in forests and soils. Meat and dairy demands are causing deforestation, which means more native land and ecosystems, say like the Amazon rainforest, are being cleared for more animal agriculture use. In fact, 70% of the Amazon forest is cleared for cattle ranches. Sadly, fires are commonly used to clear the forest as well, which in turn is putting more pollution and carbon dioxide in the air, taking away the trees. The Amazon is called the lungs of the earth. It gives us oxygen and it absorbs carbon dioxide. This is a good reason to buy locally free-range grass-fed beef if you want to cut back some of the harmful environmental effects without also giving up a cheeseburger. Also, we're using fossil fuels again, this time to make mineral fertilizers. Ammonia is used as the nitrogen source in fertilizer, requiring the use of natural gas and air for synthetic production. Nitrogen fertilizers release nitrous oxide, and phosphorus component is made of sulfur, coal, and phosphate rock. Again, all manufacturing facilities use electricity, mostly generated from coal or gas, and the end product is packed in plastic and transported across the globe. So these are the 4 contributing factors to climate change for animal agriculture. In Pennsylvania, we're already seeing climate change effects, like rising temperatures, an increase and severity of precipitation, and increasing air pollution. So let's think about this. Animal farming contributes to climate change. Climate change causes flooding, droughts, heat waves, which then all affects plant production for both the animals that we eat plus us. Thus, we're creating a very vicious cycle here. Another environmental consideration is the Earth's available land and water supply. The picture on the left shows our water breakdown. Water covers 75% of Earth, but only less than 3% of that is actual drinkable fresh water. And of that 3%, 70% is frozen in glaciers, which are melting thanks to climate change again into our seawater, which leaves just 1% of Earth's fresh drinkable water for us to use. Only 30% is accessible through aquifers. Aquifers are underground water supply that takes millions of years to accumulate, and it can't be replenished as much or as fast as we use it. Of that remaining 1% of available fresh water, what's not polluted, agriculture uses 2/3 of it to water crops, which then some are grown specifically to feed the livestock for us to consume. And 22% of that water is used for industries. According to the National Geographic, they reported in the United States, it takes 1,799 gallons of water to produce just 1 single pound of grain-fed beef. So the picture on the right shows our land breakdown. Animal agriculture occupies about 37% of our land. 70% of that is just used for animal pastures. And there's also fields to grow crops to feed the animals and crops to feed us. So let's discuss how much land is used for ground beef. For every 6 pounds of plants that are fed to cows results in just 1 pound of the cow that we would eat. And only half their weight is edible. So it takes 12 pounds of plants to feed 1 cow to produce 1 pound of cow meat. Why are we using 8 times as much land to grow plants and 1,800 gallons of water to feed a cow just to eat a burger rather than just eat the plants and drink the water ourselves? Now let's discuss biodiversity loss. This is the largest factor threatening species with extinction. Back to deforestation, as native plants are cleared for animal agriculture. All the animals and insects that depend on those plants will be forced to relocate or perish. The loss in variety of life can lead to a breakdown of an entire ecosystem. In addition, we're also killing insects. 40% of insect extinctions are caused by pesticides, which are sprayed on the grains. Pesticides are used to improve crop yields easily, but can be toxic and remain in the soil for years. Herbicides are also used to prevent weeds and accounts for 75% usage on crops, mainly corn, soy, wheat, and cotton. Then there are genetically modified crops, GMOs. GMOs are produced to be resistant to herbicides, so we can spray our crops with as much toxic weed killer as possible without killing the crop as well. Currently, 93% of soy and corn are genetically engineered to be able to use more herbicides like Roundup. 70% of soy and corn grown is then fed to livestock for us to be able to consume. In my opinion, this is why I choose to buy organic and non-GMO products. Finally, the last topic for the environmental impact of eating meat are the water and soil changes. Eutrophication means an overload of nutrients, causing dead zones in the water where marine life cannot survive. Common nutrients causing dead zones in lakes and coastal areas are the nitrogen and phosphorus, which are found in the herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, and manure. And all of that is being washed by irrigation systems and heavy rainfall, climate change again, into our water. The Gulf, there is over 400 dead zones around the world. One of the biggest ones is the Gulf of Mexico, which lies right under us in the US and is famous for its dead zone that is 8,776 square miles wide. And we're also losing our topsoil at an alarming rate. It takes nature 1,000 years to generate 3 centimeters of topsoil. An acre of healthy topsoil can contain 2,400 pounds of fungus, 1,500 pounds of bacteria, 900 pounds of earthworms, 900 pounds of arthropod and algae, and 133 pounds of protozoa. But today, we're losing our topsoil again by tilling, irrigation systems, and the heavy rainfall. The average rate of soil erosion on the US cropland is 7 tons per acre per year. Doing so also kills all the microbes and insects that create the healthy topsoil. What's left is an empty, bare soil, now more prone to erosion. So we're using too much land, too much water, polluting our land and water, contributing to climate change. Also, we can have a cheeseburger. Meanwhile, third world countries are starving, suffering droughts, heat waves, and food scarcity. Let's talk about something a little more positive now. First, I want to discuss sustainability. Sustainability means meeting the needs of our present generation without compromising the ability for future generations to also meet their needs. Sustainability encompasses the environment, economics, health, and nutrition. We cannot have a secure food supply unless that food supply is sustainable. Without sustainable practices, global environmental degradation increases the risk of irreversible and catastrophic shifts in the earth, causing food insecurity, malnutrition, starvation, migration, and ultimately death. By 2050, consumption of meat is expected to rise by 76%, and dairy products 64%. Do we have 76 and 64% more land and water? No. The animal agriculture industry is not going to tell you not to eat meat. This is a personal choice that you're going to have to make for yourself, your family, and the health of the planet. So how can we do that? Regenerative agriculture. It's a system of farming principles and practices that can sequester more carbon in the soil and lessen our atmosphere. Because there are more plants, therefore more and longer roots. More diverse plants equal more diverse microbes living in that topsoil. Regenerative agriculture can improve watersheds by obtaining better filtration and water retention in the soil. It enhances rather than destroys the ecosystem. And because there's more bioproductivity, it can improve nutrient density and crop yields. And using natural manure rather than that nitrogen-based fertilizer, all while at the same time, it's rebuilding our topsoil, which is being depleted by improper tilling. So by using regenerative agriculture rather than industrial farming practices, we can create a sustainable plant-based food supply that will preserve our land and water for future generations to come. According to the study in the journal Climatic Change in 2014, the average meat eater in the US is responsible for almost twice as much global warming as the average vegetarian, and close to 3 times that of the average vegan. We need to leave fossil fuels in the ground because it's not only the leading cause of climate change, it's also not sustainable. We need to move as rapidly as possible towards renewable energy and electric cars, but we also need to implement regenerative agriculture principles that sequester more carbon and eating a more plant-based diet in order to fight climate change and sustain our environment. There's also many health benefits associated with eating a plant-based diet. It can decrease heart disease, cancer, diabetes, high cholesterol, weight, and inflammation in your body. Please remember, our actions always have an impact, big and little. You don't have to go from eating meat to a vegan diet. Many environmentally savvy people adopted what's called a Reducatarian diet, reducing the carbon footprint foods like meat and dairy. Whether you start meatless Mondays or meat only on Monday and vegetarian the rest of the week, you can cut out just lamb and beef. You can switch to a plant-based milk. You can buy organic and local. You can do it all at once or just one step at a time. Whether you eat meat or not, one thing we all need to work on is not wasting our food. In the US, we throw about 103 million pounds of food a year. Globally, about 1/3 of all the food produced is thrown out. Food that sits in landfills releases methane as it breaks down. Food also adds weight to our trash pickups. So we can remove the food compost, the food waste from our trash pickups, and that would reduce the amount of money we pay for this trash service. If composting yourself is not for you, there's 3 local options in our area: Mother Compost, My Kitchen Harvest, and Back to Earth Compost. Or you can even bring your waste to Mom's Organic Market. Backyard composting is easy to do if you know how. And if you don't know how and you'd like to learn, we're offering a composting webinar next week, April 21st from 7 to 8 o'clock at night. And you can register on the Parks and Recreation page, just like this webinar. And once you've completed the course, you can purchase a compost bin for just $25. Lastly, we've created a handout to go along with this food webinar. It contains some information like substitutions when cooking, local restaurants with plant-based options, educational resources, and the composting options we've listed above. It is going to be emailed to everybody along with the recording of the webinar in a couple days. And for more articles and information, please again look at our Facebook page or our YouTube page for a more in-depth video. Thanks for joining our first part of our webinar series today. I think we have a couple of minutes if there's any questions before we move on to the next segment.
Great. Do we have any questions for Melissa?
I'll ask a question. This is Jason. So Melissa, I know a lot of times when people kind of have our standard American meat-heavy diet, there's a lot of hesitancy or uncertainty about how you would start to make the switch. So I was wondering if you had any advice from your own experience of what are some early steps that people might take to make this transition easier if they want to?
Sure. Well, personally myself, we transitioned away from some meat and dairy products maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I just took one thing at a time. I started with my milk, and we tried a bunch of different plant-based options until we found one that I could get my kids to like. And then after that, we would tackle another thing, yogurt or cheese, or, you know, we end up trying a lot of different meat substitutes because some of them can be finicky and, you know, taste a little different texture than meat, but just try one thing at a time, you know, 1 week, 1 day, 1 meal. You don't have to change everything all at once.
And we have another question from Olivia. How and why did you get started learning about this?
About food in general? Well, it kind of was everything. I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and before I had kids, I didn't pay too much attention to what was going on in the world. But now that I have kids, I want to make sure this world is going to be here for them when they're older. So I took a deep dive into climate change, and I learned everything I could. And that included getting electric cars and solar panels and becoming a member of the Haverford EAC. And I just want to do everything I possibly can so I could tell my kids that I tried.
Great answer. Okay,